Hi, everyone, and welcome to Meet Your Mentor. The Meet Your Mentor podcast is a podcast where I, the host, will interview a mentor to learn a little bit about their journeys and their job, asking about some advice they might have for listeners, what it means to be a mentor, and so much more. Now, my name is Elise, and as I said earlier, I'm the host of Meet Your Mentor. I'm a junior in high school, and I am an intern here at the Mentor Project. Now, before I get started and introduce you all to today's mentor, I just want to give a quick shout out to all of the listeners and all of the sponsors. You guys keep this podcast running, and we really appreciate what you do. Now, I think you will love what I have in store for you today. The mentor I get to introduce is Busayo Odunlami. Busayo is an international business advisor. He focuses his efforts on creating solutions that occur at the intersection of systems, people, and technology. With this in mind, he also works to lead technology-driven innovation for women and youth in underrepresented communities all over the globe, so that one day these people will have the tools to become economically and financially independent. Busayo was recently at a Big Four management consulting firm, and he volunteers as a board member of Birthright Africa and is also director and co-founder of a nonprofit at Billion Strong Foundation. Along with that, he has lots of past experience in international finance and professional service. It seems that Busayo has lots of varying interests and experience in things that I cannot wait to dive into. Well, without further ado, please welcome Busayo.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I'm very glad we can make this work. So, to begin with, can you just go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe how you kind of got started with all of these different things?
Sure. So I attended Lehigh University for undergrad, and I was an information and systems engineer.
Wow.
And during my time in engineering, I just sort of saw the industry going very more AI and computer driven, and I just didn't really feel like that was the direction that I wanted to go in. And junior year, I was in an organizational planning and control class,
Mhm.
and I learned about the management theorist Peter Drucker. His impact on industry, Toyota followed his total quality management framework, and that's how they've been able to have cars that last, forever. And I wanted to have that sort of impact on industry, and my driving force was my mom. When we immigrated to the United States when I was 11 from Lagos, Nigeria, my dad was a surgeon, she was a microbiologist. And when we moved here, someone had to give up their career, because when you go to school outside of the States, you're usually redoing all those certifications. So my dad redid his residency at like 45 and his exams and all that stuff.
Wow.
But my mom had to give up her career. And she's 10 times smarter than he is. So that's sort of been my driving force. The privilege that both of them have been able to pass down to me. Drucker was giving me a good opportunity to try to fulfill that mission, and that's how I got into IO Psych, which is mostly called social organizational psych. Outside of I went to Teachers College for grad school, so they call it social organizational psychology, but it's usually industrial organizational psychology in most places. And that's how I got into the industry. And that sort of, got me learning about everything about organizations, group dynamics, intergroup, and the full gamut of social psych and social sciences that apply to organizations and individuals. So after grad school, did the startup thing for a while, and I had a really good internship at the New York Health and Hospital Corporation, working in their organizational development department. So I was working on the learning management system and how to integrate new courses, and also help to teach one or two of the sort of the intro classes to the employees there. And that sort of led me to the associate program at the World Bank. And, that's sort of really where I got started. I was around 25, coming in and supporting the director of the Africa Region Learning Program. So basically a manager role, at such a young age. So
Mm-hmm.
one that required me to leverage a lot of the skills and tools that I learned in grad school, because you're in scenarios where your colleagues are twice your age, and um, being able to
Yeah.
communicate effectively so that you can influence and achieve whatever the business objectives were. In our case, it was everything from the program administration for learning, so managing the budget and sort of how it's allocated, as well as helping to support the development of new and some of the existing programs that would need updates. So that's everything from, the unit that's focused on just leadership and all the sort of the C-level folks in the region, as well as the technical experts, who are sort of in this environment where they have to balance continuing professional education for like water, sanitation, and transport
Mm-hmm.
with other things that they would like to know, like learning French or Spanish. The World Bank
Mm-hmm.
is very big on multiple languages. So um, that was a really great experience. And that experience was sort of the beginning. And I left the bank for a bit and came back a couple of years later and sort of hit the ground running, not in sort of this cool associate program, but as an independent consultant that had to build a client list
Mm-hmm.
and allow that reputation from past clients to get me more jobs. So that's sort of how I navigated my way across the bank, working with business leaders inside and outside of the bank.
Mm-hmm. That just sounds like an incredible opportunity. That must have been amazing. Um, you did a really great job describing all of that, but just so that me and other people who are listening can have a bit of a clear understanding, can you kind of just describe what like a day in that job kind of looked like at the bank?
Sure. So different periods were different, but I guess we could look
Mm-hmm.
at the beginning and some of the projects I did in the middle. So at the beginning, it's focused on the Africa region. So at the beginning of the fiscal year, it's how much money is our budget and how are we going to make this budget meet the needs that we have.
Mm-hmm.
When I first joined, there was a clear need that we needed to help managers take whatever their learning budget allocation is and look at what do they need right now versus what can they take next year. So that challenge, I ended up working with some programmers and we built a tool so managers could say, Busayo and lease, we have $1,500 for both of them. Elise has a very urgent need that's 600, and Busayo has one that's 1,000. So we've got to figure out what how to sort of basically tweaking and Busayo obviously has to give up some course, a course to make sure that because you've got that urgent technical need versus my 1,000, which could be part technical and part this cool French course
Mm-hmm.
that I want to take. So that sort of that was one thing that came up, and then part of the day also is just communicating with the business leaders who work in the subgroups that help with our program. So we're meeting with a course workshop facilitator to say, hey, you're going to be leading this 3-day training in one of our region's office. What's the agenda? Making sure that sort of they hit the bells and the whistles. Now, I should say in a lot of these meetings, I'm just sitting there listening to the director talk and sort of the C-suite, but it was it was a really good opportunity. Every once in a while they would ask a question, and I think the one lesson from that is just I don't know is better than saying that
Yeah.
and that. And then there's also a part of my day which I volunteered for the JPA associate program. So part of my day would be maybe at lunch sending some emails to the team on we would host like a lot of these brown bag lunches so that grad schools and MBA programs could come to tell us about their work and why we would want to come there, all the way to knowledge talks where we would bring in experts across the different um, sub areas that the bank focuses on. The World Bank is a global development organization. So, it's everything from helping to build the country to the water and sanitation to fisheries. Right now, climate change is at the forefront. So
Yeah.
the bank is really focused on climate change and
Hmm.
helping to really sort of push that agenda forward and try to help countries and cities sort of be better at meeting their climate resiliency.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I guess another thing that we would be doing is just general sort of day to day keeping an eye on, what's coming down the pipeline and trying to anticipate possible risks. In my first year, I didn't know much, but
Hmm.
by the second year, that day, which went from sort of anticipating risks in the first year, in the second year, it was more, okay, I anticipated the risk. That's nice, but now you actually know the parts and the people who are required to solve the problem. So, start communicating with them and sort of starting to push things down the pipeline. So I'm going to the director with a solution rather than just, this is a risk.
Yeah. Yeah. That definitely is kind of a very cool progression to almost look at of just, how you kind of got a better handle on things as you were there, I guess you could say. Um, yeah. So obviously that wasn't like the path that you had in mind to begin with when you were like in college, as you said you were an engineer. So my question is kind of like knowing where you are now and the experiences that you've had, what is like some advice that you might have for someone who would want to work at the World Bank or do something similar to what you're doing at the moment?
For sure. I applied to the bank 5 times.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah, so I started applying in college for, internships and whatnot. And it wasn't until that the internship I had after grad school sort of matched. So, the one thing is, a lot of the people that they're looking at are qualified, right? So it's less about the qualification, but I think it's more about like what you're doing, right? You're building a path that shows, if this is what I want to do, there are ways that you can show that in a volunteer perspective, right? In this case, it's like an internship. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, anyone trying to get into the bank, getting that internship actually gives you the exposure. And it's better to get the internship and know you don't want to do it than get the job and you don't want to do it and you're stuck in the job and the
Yeah.
transition and you want to sort of keep all your bridges. So I think one area, if you want to work at the World Bank, is look at the sustainable development goals, right? So these are sort of goals that cover the full gamut. Everything from we need to get more women and young girls have to have education. We want to have resiliency for the climate. We want to reduce absolute poverty. There's so many different parts of the sustainable development goals that give a better idea into the bank work. One of the things that the World Bank did was, after World War II, they basically helped to rebuild, right, most of Europe, right? So that also gave
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the technical expertise that they've been able to build upon. The bank also has a private sector arm. It's the World Bank Group. So they've got the International Finance Corporation, which is, a private sector company, just like my work in Big Four consulting. So there's really a lot that people can do with the bank, and I think looking at sustainable development goals is really a good start. That in the combination with an internship in any of those areas will really help an individual learn more about global development. Um, and the way I look at it is if even if you are not passionate in that industry, you can always volunteer, right?
Yeah.
So
Gotcha. Well, that's always good to know.
yeah.
Um, so I know when I kind of introduced you, I talked a little bit about Birthright Africa. And
Yes.
is that something you did independent of the World Bank, or is that something that you were introduced to through that?
Yeah, that was completely independent.
Okay.
I'm from New York,
Mm-hmm.
Nigerian, but from New York, and I have a lot of friends who done birthright trips
Mm-hmm.
over to Israel. A lot of my friends
Yeah.
have done it, and they would come back with more affinity and more passion for the cultural link. And I was like, okay, well, we have a nice portion of African Americans here in the States. Why don't we try and find some sort of program like that where, at the time, it's like you would first take them on trips, and then maybe you could evolve and actually find out the specific country, and they can do a follow up to that specific country.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say that no idea is unique under the sun. So when I was looking it up, well, it already existed. It was Birthright Africa,
Mm-hmm.
and really got a chance to engage with the co-founder. When we talked over the years and sort of kept in touch, and at a couple of years ago, I reached out to her just to sort of reconnect, and she's like, "Hey, I've got a board role for you, and you can sort of try to help champion and share with your networks." And you know, I would admit, in the last year or two, I've been trying to get more active to really spread the word,
Mm-hmm.
especially because like there's so much value in being able to understand and get a little bit more of a cultural link, which you're not going to get until you actually like visit the continent.
Mm-hmm.
So with the Birthright Africa program, what they do is they take about 30 to 40 youth and they take them to Ghana. So you're doing everything from the cultural thing to like walking through the wall that the slaves would have to walk through, that no man's, where it's like that tiny gate and they're sort of looking into the ocean, and you engage with the people, you eat the food, you visit cultural sites, and usually for a lot of African American youth who participate in the program, it awakens that cultural link, and that everything that I am, it's because I have that link to my Nigerianness, and then the luxury of living in New York City, so that sort of is like taking that global nature of Lagos and plopping you right in Brooklyn. So it's
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's an amazing idea. Like, I'm very glad I'm hearing about it now through you, because obviously, so you're not going to know this, but I'm Jewish. And so I haven't been entertaining the idea of a birthright trip because I have some health issues going on.
okay.
But like my sister and my cousins have all been really looking forward to it. And they were kind of planning to go like this year, but because of COVID, everything kind of got canceled.
Yeah.
But it definitely, I've heard so many people talk about how incredible an experience that is. And so it just,
Yeah.
I
I
think
mean, that same zeal right there.
yeah, exactly. It makes so much sense to expand on that and not just do it like to Israel, but to, all different nationalities. So,
And that was, the same affection that even you have secondhand, right? I
yeah,
was getting from a lot of my friends who went, and I was like, wow, that's awesome. Like, and,
right.
and it's like, I have that because I spent my first 11 years in growing up in Nigeria. So I was like, you know what? Like, people, African Americans would definitely like that link. Cause I had a bunch of friends who, you know, because of that, the lack of that link, that cultural link, they don't have a lot of strength in their identity, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so, but yeah, I looked it up and it already existed, and that's sort of how I got on as a board member, a regional
Mm-hmm.
board member from DC. So at least for me, I think it's really looking forward to. I need to up the ante this year and really help leverage my global network to get them funding and exposure so that we can actually achieve, the dream of
Yeah.
being able to not just take 30 to 50 people, but have some sort of a program where we can work directly with African governments to also do some of the funding as well.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing, and that's a great goal to achieve. So I obviously hope this podcast, along with other things, will help spread the word so that you guys are eventually able to accomplish that.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, thank you so much for talking a little bit more about that. That was definitely one of the things that kind of sparked my interest, and I wanted to learn more about it. Next, I want to kind of shift gears a little bit and just, you know, in short terms, I guess, can you just tell us, what it means for you to be a mentor, and perhaps talk about some of your own mentors that you had, whether it's now or when you were younger?
Sure. I'm learning that to be a mentor is not always just me to the mentee, but also that bi-directional channel. And I've always been a student government type person, been doing it since high school and clubs and whatnot. So volunteering in roles where you can provide mentorship to your colleagues or help, sort of support civic is been a way for me to I guess keep balance, maybe, but things sort of really accelerated when I got to the World Bank because when I joined the bank, I, again, work because a lot of my colleagues were a lot older, so I would always go and sort of talk to them about ideas. And I worked in startup while I was in grad school at Columbia. So always, there's always something. And, I'd said, okay, well, we've got this group of retirees called the 1818 Society. They're leaving the bank. They've got 25 years of experience, and we're coming in, and we want that, knowledge from them. So, speaking with some of the colleagues, I got some of their help to be able to pilot a mentorship program for the associates. And it was, again, bidirectional. You're leaving the bank after 25 years to go be independent. Well, you're basically going to be your own boss, and all the people who are helping you with your digital things, that's going to be you. So that was an opportunity for the new staff like myself to provide digital skills to retirees, and they've got 25 years of the gamut. So pretty much anything you want to know about the bank, and even who to know and whatnot, they're providing that to you. So that was sort of my first start into really established mentoring. And lucky for me, a colleague of mine joined the associate program the year after, so he was able to continue the program. And after a couple of years, it got mainstreamed into still the same sort of associate program, but I think they call it like an analyst program now. So that sort of was my big first experience into that. And through that, and obviously volunteering for the associate group, it sort of just led me down the mentorship path. I had an opportunity through business school to meet one of the board members of the Mentor Project, and obviously she introduced me to Deb, and telling Deb my story, she was like, "Yeah, you have to be a mentor." And it's been really great, especially because it sort of aligns with the work we're doing with the foundation. So it's been a dream come true. But I would definitely say that, to recap, that mentorship to me is a bi-directional channel where the mentee and the mentor both have value. So mentoring down and mentoring up. And there have been times in my life where I haven't done a really good job of, as a mentee, reaching out to superiors, when I needed help. Or so that's something I'm working on. TMI.
Gotcha. No, not at all. That's very interesting that you say that, because that's kind of one of my standard questions that I ask mentors on this podcast. And I've heard a lot of varying answers, but all kind of have the same general sense of, mentoring is incredible, and it's so amazing to be able to pass on information to people, whether they're older than you, younger than you, whatever. But I haven't really heard people say it's very bi-directional. And I think that's interesting that you mentioned that. Because a little bit of a tangent, but at my school, like I said earlier, I'm in high school, and we're unique in the sense that I call all of my teachers and principal and everything by their first name, because they're kind of trying to even the playing and get students to realize that they have potential, they have a voice. And so that kind of just was reminiscent of what you were saying. So I just thought I'd mention that.
No, they're right. They're right. Because, I think at the end of the day, where society is going right now with technology and disruption. So in private sector, I always say that they make them smarter than we are, right? Because, college students now have access to way more information than we did. And it can lead you down a path of thinking you know everything. We don't. With life and experience, you'll see, what you thought you knew at 21 and 25, et cetera. But if you guys as high school students are going to actually be co-creators of your own destiny, then like your teachers are trying to do to empower you is like you've got to take that ownership, right? And through
Yeah.
that way of them, allowing you to have that collegial approach means then you don't have an excuse anymore to direct the way you learn, right?
Hmm.
Except in AP classes, the teachers know everything.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. But yeah, I just thought that was kind of an interesting connection. Um, so I have two main things left, I guess.
Okay.
And before we get to that, I just have like one last quick question, which is just to anyone who's listening who wants to reach out or learn more about you, where can they do that? Where can they find your information?
I have an e-portfolio, Busayo, Odunlami.com.
Okay.
And, it's spelt as it would be in the text, that would go out when we post this.
Yeah.
But even more importantly is to check out the work we're doing at the Billion Strong Foundation, and that's billionstrong.me.
Okay.
And shameless plug for Billion Strong. Billion Strong sort of came about through 10 years from starting in the bank of volunteering for the youth groups, everything from the Young African Society, which we developed, to an existing group at the bank called the Youth to Youth Community. And in building a lot of these programs for nonprofits and youth all around the world, technology and disruption just kept coming, but there was always a need for those youth and even myself to have a core of digital, social, and business / entrepreneurship skills.
Mm-hmm.
So the foundation was, we looked at the framework that would encompass that. So for digital, you would have to have some sort of a coding link in whatever your industry. Social skills, so everything from emotional intelligence, customer service, mental health, art, music, fitness, to sort of the standard business things that you would require. So the marketing, now it's more digital marketing and accounting and leadership and managing people. So it was really just more of us trying to provide like a mini sort of MBA type for individuals who, they're trying to get access to this digital economy that's happening all around them, and they may have not gone to school, or they may already even know these concepts, but not the technical terms. So our goal is to get 1 billion people who can engage and learn these skills. And obviously, coming from the development world, you're always trying to make sure that you get youth and young girls in the more emerging markets. Now, COVID changed everything, which is kind of right around the time when we launched, where, you could graduate from college, and, you were working at a really nice restaurant that was the majority of your income, but the restaurant's closed. So even you now have to figure out how to really be an independent business owner online, right?
Yeah.
So again, everything's changing, right?
Yeah.
Even construction is going to be more AI and robot driven. So if you're working construction now, you can find out what sort of code would be required to do those same things that you're doing manually, but with a computer. This way you're giving yourself the ability to continue in that industry. But the way it usually works is, if you can learn one coding language and be at intermediate to mastery level, you can learn another one. It's easier to so.
Yeah. Well, that's all really, really good information to have. And then as well, just to make it easier for listeners, I will go ahead and put those links in the description of the podcast.
Okay.
So that way, they don't have to memorize it.
Another way they can find, me as well, is through the About and our Mentor Project website as well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So.
All right. Always
three
good
ways.
to know. Yep. There you go. Okay. So the last thing that I have, well, I want to change things up a little bit. So for listeners who have been around for a little while and have listened to a lot of these podcasts, I've done quite a few episodes. And so, as I said, I want to switch things up a little bit. So I have a couple like rapid fire questions for you almost.
Let's go.
And I just think it's kind of obviously in mentoring, you're sharing information and all of that. But I always think it's nice to know your mentor as like a person and not just as their job and their professional side. So none of these questions are going to be like related to your job. They're just kind of random rapid fire questions. So the first one I have is, what's your favorite book?
Oh, my favorite book, The War on Art. Because one of my helps my soul is I mix music, and with doing a lot of the events, I DJ as it's Nohdeh, it's Nohdeh, and it's sort of a play on African Pidgin English, which is basically like African Ebonics. And it's like, where is he? Nohdeh, he's not here. And I was like trying to play on like not from here, from space kind of music. But the war on art, because I always find that if I'm able to create artistically, it helps me get my sort of professional side as well, So the war on art, because it's sort of a constant. For a while, I had writer's block, and I still have it majorly. So every time I read it, in fact, I'm looking at it right now. I'm trying to read it again, but that's probably my favorite book. That and Meditations with Marcus Aurelius.
Gotcha. Interesting. That's cool. I love how two of these other questions are probably going to have to do with like you DJing. But my next question is, do you play any instruments?
After I broke the drums in 6th grade, I didn't touch any instruments anymore.
Gotcha.
Until I got to Lehigh, and back then it was the CD world, digital analog. So I was a social chair for my fraternity, and that led me to DJ on the college radio. And I just I DJed at the Columbia radio station in New York as well, 89.9, and I just kept also mixing music for friends. I love the way that music moves my soul.
Yeah.
And I try to make that every like mix that I do, I was trying to sort of do that journey of like really having that impact. So some of my stuff could be a little bit more emo, but
yeah, that's amazing that you have that though. My third question, which I have a feeling I can anticipate this answer, is how do you spend your time off?
Well, I am a co-parent. So, it's sort of balancing time with my son, going to play dates with him and his mom, trying to get as many mixes as I can out, and the Billion Strong, really within the next year plus, really trying to push the foundation so that we can raise enough money so that there's a team doing this. Right now, I felt like I'm sort of in the way. And sort of building sort of the team out to run the foundation so it can be a self-sustaining entity. That takes up a lot of my time.
Gotcha. My last question is, what is your favorite movie franchise?
Whew, man, oh my goodness, Lord of the Rings.
Gotcha. Good choice.
I would say it would have been Game of Thrones, but when the first season came out, I got all the books like by the second episode, and it just wasn't the same. So I can't really. They Hollywood guys too. It's for sure Lord of the Rings, because those were all I read those books too. Those were awesome. It was like a really good match. That's my favorite franchise.
Good to know. That's very cool.
Those were awesome questions.
Thank you. That was all the stuff I had. But thank you so much, Busayo, for sharing all of this with us. This has been amazing. I'm so glad we could find a time to make this work. For everyone who's watching or listening, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you all found that as interesting as I did and are able to hopefully take something away from it. If you want to learn more about Busayo, you can feel free to go to the places he mentioned, which, as I said earlier, will be in the description of the podcast. And if you want to learn more about the Mentor Project, you can feel free to go to www.mentorproject.org, which will also be in the description of the podcast. I hope to see all of you back here next week. And once again, thank you so much to our sponsors for making this podcast possible. We appreciate everything you do. And thanks to our listeners and our watchers, we're able to keep this podcast going. So we are very thankful for you as well. And I hope all of you and Busayo have a wonderful week. Thank you.